Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. It's Matt Coleman, your host from Magnify World. Speaking from our Los Angeles studio, we have another guest, and as you know, over the coming weeks, we're talking to 50 of the most interesting companies championing innovation and also emerging technology. And today, from Melbourne, who was originally living up in New York and Boston, we were just talking about, is the managing partner, Shelli Trung, from Second Century Ventures, but the company that she manages is called REACH Australia. How are you today?
I'm very well. In Melbourne, we've just been slightly relaxed on lockdown, so very happy to see the spring weather and interact with it as opposed to just watching it from the window.
Oh, that's great news. Wasn't aware of that today. So you must be really happy. So what does that mean for the local community? Can you go out? What?
The curfews have been lifted, so I can start raging into the night. No, not that I do that anyway, but yeah, we can sort of party all night now. And also, we're still sort of under the restrictions of 5 kilometres. We can't travel beyond that, but we can spend 2 hours in the sunshine. So just going to soak up my vitamin D when I get the 2 hours, to go outside.
Wow, that's good news for you. So look, tell us, Shelley, about how you got into what you're doing. You run an accelerator mostly around Series A and Series B investment in real estate, but tell us how you actually got into that role and what you're up to in the US.
Sure. So perhaps just to wind back a little bit, I sort of spent about 5 years living in the States, probably about 7 years ago. So I've been back home for a few years now. And when I was over there, I sort of started my own real estate technology publication and started mentoring, giving back. And so I sort of started that journey, as a founder. And then after 3 years, I actually sold the company. I was actually raising my first seed round and was very lucky that I actually surprisingly got acquisition offers, and I wasn't really looking to sell. But by then, 5 years into the New York and Boston blizzard, I came back during the summertime here. And I thought, what am I doing? The weather's beautiful in Melbourne during the summertime and wintertime in the States. And so I think, those acquisition offers came in at a good time. Some of my personal circumstances have also changed by then. And then I sort of, sold the company, came back home to Melbourne. And well, actually I took a very long Europe trip first, 4 months off, and started mentoring to other founders, because having sold my company, I just wanted to give back. I wanted to help other companies, other founders. And then I started writing checks, because again, once you're able to deliver a bit of value to startup founders, you see them grow. And a lot of this mentoring I was doing pro bono. I just wanted to help out. And I was like, you know what? I should get some upside, And so I started writing some angel investor checks early on. Didn't intend to be an investor really, but again, just saw the value I was able to deliver with my network, with, having gone through the process myself. And then when I came back home, I think just my international experience, that really helped me help other startup founders, particularly in Asia Pacific, where there is just a lack of venture capital. I started just teaching other accelerators workshops on how to pitch, how to raise funding. And there was just, again, very few people with that international experience, exiting a company and then, writing actual investor checks. So then got sort of asked to manage a fund at QUT CEA, which is a fund backed by Queensland University of Technology. So yeah, pretty much by then I'd been asked to actually properly manage a fund, moved up to Queensland for it, did that for about 18 months, managing a creative tech fund where it was mostly seed Series A companies. When I came in, there was roughly 8 companies in the portfolio, invested over 4 years. And then I moved that 8 companies to about 35 investments in about 18 months. So, really escalated that with accelerator programs and just more deal flow, cleaning, sort of managing the process a little bit differently. And then I really wanted to get back into real estate technology. I've got a background in real estate development, and I had a relationship with Second Century Ventures already, having mentored on their program right in the beginning. And, really had a chat to them and said, hey, you guys need to be out here. There's no one helping the real estate tech guys. There's a a lot of fintech, a lot of fintech, but I'm like, come on, real estate groups, let's get going, and I'd actually come back home for, a few years, and I'm like, nothing's happening, and how can I help? Again, that sort of how can I help mentality. And just over 6 months, me and Dave Garland, the managing partner for Second Century Ventures, had a really good chat, figured out where we could help each other, and eventually, came on board with them and grew the REACH Accelerator program out here for sort of Asia Pacific. We're the only program out in this specific region.
Oh, fantastic. So, yeah, you're obviously in Melbourne, and you're covering what? Companies in marketing and finance, and it covers mortgage, big data, hardware. I've got a list of projects here. But, probably one of the biggest projects I've seen, that you've had a success in worldwide is Docusign. Obviously, it's worth about $6 billion now.
Well,
what a great product, and one that I use actually quite a lot.
I'm glad to hear that. Look, Docusign is an investment Second Century Ventures made about 10 years ago, very early on, and this is how early, just to set your sort of brain space back. It was before digital signatures were actually legal. So that's a sort of vision, I think. Second Century Ventures is actually backed by the National Association of Realtors, and they really saw the opportunity of how great is this technology, how it can really improve real estate transactions, right? And that's sort of the theme with every single company we look at, because prop tech really sort of is a word that is still quite new. Like it's an industry that's roughly 10 years old, and it sort of came about after the GFC because a lot of transparency was a lot more needed in the real estate transaction. So, we look at technology that is helpful for the real estate industry. And that's marketing technology, that's mortgage technology, as you mentioned. But Docusign is a very good example, a piece of, again, before digital signatures were legal, a piece of legal technology. It was probably doing pretty well already, probably outside the sector. I wasn't really personally involved in that, but, again, 10 years ago, digital signatures went legal, so it wasn't really adopted. And what we sort of helped it, do was actually launch into the real estate vertical. And so that is every technology out there that wants to access the real estate vertical. And we think personally, again, being backed by National Association of Realtors, we need to feel that it is actually going to help the industry grow, provide better customer service, provide better transparency, just serve that real estate professional as well as that end consumer. And so that's a very general approach we take to any technology. So CRMs, legal technology, financial technology as well, but also construction tech, anything from, where do we find land, all the way through to how can we, a piece of hardware in a residential building or commercial building.
Fantastic. I wonder, when did, digital signatures actually become legal? I mean, when you say only 10 years ago, it must only be like 7 or 8 years ago.
Look, it is probably 7 or 8 years ago, and one of the really key things is, being part of a company being backed by the National Association of Realtors. We do have a very influential network, it is, NAR's been around for 100 years. Its brand is very well recognized in the US. And I think that's where the power of our global network is also. So, the National Association of Realtors actually has 100 bilateral agreements in 85 countries. So we have relationships with other real estate associations internationally as well. So again, with REACH itself, with REACH Global, because, besides REACH Australia, there's also REACH Canada and REACH UK as well in the last 6 months roughly we've launched. And the idea is that we will look at technology on a global scale and help those companies access the real estate industry, again, globally, and sort of just to help these companies grow on a much bigger level. When, for example, when a company comes into my program, when they're ready, they can actually access the reach of, the reach global network, i.e., go to the UK for some of their programming. Actually, my 6 companies being our region, they're already, quite a few of them were actually international from day one. And so they've actually been able to take advantage of, connections in the UK, Canada, the US. And so this has been, for me, I think that's incredibly helpful for, Asia Pacific companies who just find it tricky to navigate internationally. I had to do it myself when I moved to the States, and anything to make it a little bit easier is, I think, really relevant for our region.
So tell us, you've got 6 companies in the accelerator you mentioned before. And I know you primarily focus on Series A or B, which is anywhere north of 5 or 10 million, basically. But you do have an opening for seed investment, you mentioned as well. Can you tell us a little bit about, some of the companies you've signed in the last 18 months?
Sure. So again, I sort of accept applications globally. So all the REACH programs accept applications anywhere in the world. In our first year, I know our applications were from about 12 different countries, including Germany, US as well. And so, that's sort of what we encourage companies to do. Think about where they want to grow for the next 12 months and actually apply to the program where they want to concentrate their growth, knowing that they will get, additional access to other regions when they're ready. And so I think that's one of the key things when we look at the stage of the company, because we do have a global network, we do have the power of that global network. So the stage of the company itself is when, if you're seed stage, we certainly will look at you, we want to know about you, want to hear from you. If anything, we want to know about you early because we can start sort of educating you on the real estate industry, how to access that industry, how to sell in that industry, how to just understand it and serve it better. That's our sort of role. So roughly speaking, we say the criteria, and again, it's not a hard and fast rule. Every VC has a criteria, but they always are kind of flexible around that based on the right sort of, metrics. For us, it's typically, we say, look, roughly turning over about $1 million in revenue, because we help companies, it's a sales and marketing program. Being an event-based sales and marketing program, if you've only got a couple of customers and you don't have your sales process and you don't really have your sales team ready, you're just not going to be ready for our program and the value we provide. And again, being a founder previously myself, I think there's a consciousness of not really going too hard too fast if you're not ready, because sending you all these strategic connections, you need to be able to convert them. And again, if you don't really have some of that worked out and that team worked out, it's just not going to be ideal for you. However, you should still apply because we always shortlist things a little bit early. You get early access to certain things. But the main criteria is usually traction, revenue, a solid sales team, and somewhat of a sales process and onboarding process in place. All my DD questions relate to a lot of that and understand that, if we understand your sales process, we can think, well, can we actually help you? Can we help you with your existing sales process or where you want to go with your sales process? It doesn't have to be perfect. We're not, we are still with startups here, and we know there's a good element of, unpredictableness. COVID certainly has done that for us this year, but I think it's just really important to have something worked out when you come into the REACH program.
And how does the local governments in each state potentially support you? Was Melbourne strategic? Because I know Queensland has the Ignite Fund and other states have a similar operation where they could co-fund R&D in particular. Can you tell us a little bit about the government support? Because you don't get that a lot, around the world, particularly in the US. It is more entrepreneurial here. But, the UK has and Canada in particular, I know of those markets. I know China and Israel has a huge support network. And I know you stretch over into Asia, which we're going to talk about in a little bit with the dynamics of the regions and then how you maneuver yourself. So, how does all that work with government funding?
I think it's great having access to government funding. It's just, I think the psychology in our ecosystem being quite young, it does need a little bit of help to get, going. Look, for us, we haven't actually had any government support at the moment, government grant support. I think it's just, again, given that we take companies globally, both coming in and then, expanding out, I think it's just a slightly different perspective. Again, we're sort of Series A, Series B level. There's probably very few scale-up programs globally. I believe Microsoft runs one, but I think it's quite different from the way we run ours. For example, ours is core sales and marketing. You are out there 9 months, on the road, sales and marketing, all of our content is directed to sales and marketing. So we're a little bit different in that way. We're based out of Melbourne, mainly because I'm just from here. I know our management partner, Dave Garland, actually studied out here at Melbourne University. So I guess we're both quite familiar, but last year I spent, half the time traveling through Asia. So, it's just strategically government funding, it's great that's available. It's sometimes not the easiest to access for startups as well, particularly if you've got more of a global perspective, because I think the states tend to have a mandate where they are looking for earlier companies to be based in that location, whereas we're more outward looking. We're looking for companies who want to really go international, and that might mean that some jobs end up being here. Some jobs are really international, as well, but also bring companies to our region. So I think that the governments are starting to get into that scale-up phase and understanding that. But again, I feel like there's still a little bit of a early gap because there's just not really many true scale-up programs globally, and we're one of the ones that are actually, have launched for regions.
Yeah. Yeah, I know you don't usually disclose the global fund, but it is one of the second largest funds globally, right, for this sector.
Yes. Yeah, we're actually one of the largest prop tech funds globally. We are, solely backed by the National Association of Realtors. We don't disclose it because we've got one limited partner. Most of the other funds are out there constantly raising, and so they sort of, have to really attract the kind of media that they need for some of that fundraising. Whereas we're really here to serve the real estate industry. We're sort of taking a slightly different approach. Look, we're still a venture capital firm. We're still here for really, I think commercial returns, but also we have a second very important criteria where we look at that technology and go, well, again, like a Docusign, is that going to help the industry? How is that going to help the industry? Can we actually help this company grow into the industry? And I think that's a really, it's not a small box to tick. It has to be, for us, relevant to the industry to support the real estate professionals out there. And look, the industry itself is suffering, in all sorts of ways at the moment, with retail being, closed, with, obviously the hospitality industry being hit as well. So again, these are things that we are conscious of when we run, the fund and the accelerator, and just opportunities to help those real estate industry groups get back on their feet. I think all of us are actually real estate people first, and then ended up being in venture capital. So we do tend to understand the two sort of streams, if you like.
That's fantastic. And tell us more about the dynamics of the region. That we're going to come back to that, particularly, what countries in Asia are you looking at and receiving applications from?
Yeah. So I think something like 90% of our applications did come from APAC. Last year, quite a few of them were from Southeast Asia. I think it's roughly 30% from Southeast Asia, and so look, one of the really interesting things that I find having, being a sort of a global citizen, I like to say, I lived in London, I've lived in the US as well, and, spent a lot of time traveling through Asia doing business. And one of the key things I do notice, besides sort of just culturally wise, Australian entrepreneurs and Asia Pacific entrepreneurs, the amount of venture capital done now is actually more than North America, but that's really new for our region, right? The amount of dollars, I believe like China now does more venture capital, I think about 18 months ago, they eclipsed what the US did, and that's that's, that's not counting government grant funding, and also on top of that, also, you think of salaries, you think of real estate as well, price per square feet. That's a lot of people being employed in technology, right? Like when you do those salary comparisons in Australia, Asia, Southeast Asia, obviously as well, and so that's a ridiculous amount of technology, and people building it. So I think that's one of the areas that I think, is an opportunity for Asia. We get a lot, like one of the distinctive things when I looked at the application pipeline last year was we got a lot of IoT technology, a lot of a lot of offline going online, and that's a lot of IoT technology because we're so close to a lot of the manufacturing. And so as a result, we've got access and we know how to access sensors, cheap sensors, but, cheap, well-made, actually, more and more well-made now. And so I think that tends to come into play. Asia Pacific also has a huge sustainability theme. Every single panel I've been on the last 6 months is mostly, sustainability has been top of mind. I'm asked that constantly from real estate groups, which I love seeing. I think just the corporate responsibility for that. So that's a theme that I see in the companies wanting to come here. Like I'm seeing a lot of companies from Europe and US wanting to come here first, because they've realized that, this is top of mind for a lot of real estate groups, and they can actually, satisfy that criteria out here, and that they can actually grow faster out here with that sustainability theme. A lot of people might not know, Australia and New Zealand has actually been, ranked number 1 for the last 8 years in terms of the most sustainable buildings. So again, this is sort of quite unique to our region. But if you're coming here for a lot of venture capital money, like it's starting to happen, but some of it is still, very regions focused, and again, I think that's where the dynamic is a little bit different. A lot of our founders still need to be taught how to manage venture capital as well, external money. But again, I think that's just going to, keep growing as people, as founders exit companies. They'll hopefully give back, invest, mentor, go through that cycle that I think the US has been doing for many years.
Yeah, the Australasian market is a great test bed, isn't it, really, for, new products, to take globally. So you are right, you can really take advantage of that. Look, tell us about, with the Chinese market and South Korea and Vietnam's a bit of a hotbed now, and Indonesia and all around that region. I mean, they are a hotbed also in the emerging tech space with virtual reality and augmented reality, and particularly the Chinese region, of course, as well, trying to rival Silicon Valley and the rest of the world. Have you seen anything interesting in the emerging tech space, even drone technology, for real estate and for agriculture and on all that sort of stuff?
Yeah. Actually, a really good example is Propeller Aero. I think the last bit of the name is Propeller, raised about $26 million about a month ago, confirmed. So they're actually drone technology. They're drone technology looking to really map out a regional area, data analytics around that. So that's actually really exciting. I believe it's the first big round for this kind of technology. And again, hardware, offline meets online. Like that's a really perfect example of more and more of these companies really in Asia Pacific doing a lot better than ones internationally, because the manufacturing's here. The understanding of that technology is very grounded in this region. But, I think generally speaking, it is, I'm seeing a lot of, as you said, a lot of the competition is now starting to move to less about access, but more about user experience, and certainly in China, for example. China is very much entering that luxury market phase, where everything is about, brand experience, and again, that's where a lot of that technology has been evolving, and quite rapidly as well, going back to the amount of venture capital, but how many salaries it actually pays for. And so, this is quite interesting. But, I also, you mentioned Indonesia, but, one of the regions is actually very overlooked, and I know they are just hungry for technology, is the Philippines. Philippines, one, speaks English, quite a few of their population are actually young people compared to, the aging population in other countries like China and Japan has an aging population, issue, but Philippines is very much like, wow, they've got a lot of young people, and they statistically, they spend something like 5 hours a day on their mobile phones, like they are already tech savvy, except the amount of venture capital into the Philippines is 1/10 of Thailand. But the Philippines is actually the second largest population in Southeast Asia, right? I think it's after Indonesia, but they're receiving 1/10 the venture capital. But everyone's on their phones already. What's going on there? And again, they speak English. They speak English. And like, what is going on? So I think that's where it's very fascinating and very interesting. And again, a lot of technology companies just skip over Philippines, because it's just they're not understanding that dynamic, But I'm on the ground here and I see it, right? And one of the great things is one of our companies actually right now, after a session we introduced them to about 3 months ago, they're now working on a project to actually roll out their technology for an entire city. Right, we're not talking one building, we're talking an entire city. Last year I met with a developer that was, putting up 7 new cities. Because last year they did 5 and 5 wasn't enough, but this year they're going to do 7. And this is one developer doing this. And so this is one of the areas I think is really exciting, where you are part of a ground up project. And again, one of our companies is going in and their technology is going to be on every street of this new city, every building of this new city. And we are talking the amount of technology that is beyond belief, really, from most of the ones internationally. So that's why I'm really excited. We're also being invited to projects in China. Again, sustainable, brand new cities that are eco-friendly cities. They've invited us to be part of a lot of these things because they know that, the way we invest is going to be relevant to the region. Out of the 6 companies I invested in, 3 of them are actually in the smart city space in my first year. So, quite interesting. And a lot of that crosses over with drone technology, with IoT technology, with sort of that AR, VR experience as well.
Oh, that's great. What are the names of those companies that are, when you say on every street corner, do you mean this is the IoT or a security system, or is it?
I can't disclose that deal's still being worked out.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
But yeah, basically, out of our 6 companies, that they sort of, go anywhere from a parking solution all the way through to property management. We've got a strata management solution as well. That's sort of an accounting software for strata managers. But we've got a property management solution that takes care of tenants and onboarding, but also an e-tendering platform for commercial real estate groups. So again, it's quite broad what we see as real estate technology, but a lot of that does involve, having myself managed a creative tech fund, the experience of this technology and the real estate asset actually is quite important when we invest into the technology, because real estate people are, they tend to be a little bit, I think, conservative when it comes to technology because they're used to hard assets. And this is where the experience is to be. Look, I'm a real estate person myself. I've been a real estate owner, occupier, developer, and I'm in real estate because I like hard assets. I like actually be able to see what I invest in. And that's the psychology that a lot of technology people don't understand when they're selling to the real estate industry. And again, that's why there's value in the REACH program itself to help you bridge that gap. But, that's where I think, if you're working in that area or developing products in that area, you need to think about these things. You need to think about how to sell to the real estate industry that typically likes to be able to see what they deal with every day.
Yeah, well, architects are using VR every day around the world to design future buildings, of course. And at our last Magnify event, actually in Melbourne, which was about 18 months ago, there was a company called Champagne Soda, I believe they've just changed their name, that had photorealistic walkthroughs of a new race park, basically a sports park with buildings and all sorts of stuff going on. But the quality is really been up now by all the new headsets. So I think the real estate business in VR is going to go from strength to strength. I don't know if you've got any comments about that.
Absolutely. Look, AR/VR, even when I ran the Creative Tech Fund for the university, we did not do any AR/VR investments because we just weren't convinced the technology was quite there and how to actually apply it in a business setting. So that's really twofold, two areas. So the experience wasn't quite there yet. And also, well, how do people want to use it? And I think they tie in together, right? But I agree with you. I've actually seen quite a few AR/VR companies in this last year that are just really, the experience is just exceptional. And actually they're doing really well in the real estate vertical. We're looking at a couple for our next batch for 2021 class. And so, I think the experience is at a level where we can start looking a lot more seriously at it. I know for me, I'm tiny, 5 feet tall, and when I put those headsets on, I get a headache. It's just, I get a bit of a headache, and that's just not a great experience, right? Because it just doesn't, I don't want to put it on. And I think, again, with that evolving as well, with wearables itself evolving, I think there's a lot more opportunity to really enhance this experience, fix that, and then the industry will be on board. Because, again, it's a hard asset. People want to touch and feel it. So, again, I think that's a really interesting opportunity for technology out here.
And I think with the advent of smart glasses, although they are in the market, there's obviously new ones that are just being announced with Apple. I don't know whether you watched the Facebook Connect conference the other week, but they've done a deal with Ray-Ban and their corporation out of Europe to create Facebook's new smart glasses. So that's going to be an interesting display of, with IoT, as you said, not only for real estate, but for every aspect of life, to be honest.
Yeah.
So listen, just drawing to a close in a minute, but I wanted to make sure you offered some advice to an entrepreneur in this sector about, first impressions. What do you actually look for? What are your top 3 things you're looking for? And also, maybe to end on, is what you learned in the big markets over in the US with your startup. What was the key learning for you?
Criteria-wise for founders, I think one of the really key things that we look for is just traction. Again, being a sales and marketing, accelerator program, you need to sort of ideally, convince us that you do have some sort of sales and marketing process that you are ready to scale. Just the nature of the program itself. And secondly, really, ready to scale means, do you have your team in place? Why is your team the best team to execute on this? And I would really encourage those who are in sort of that sort of creative tech space, that emerging technology space, who haven't thought about how they can apply the solution to the real estate industry, to look at us. To think about, well, how can we, help enhance that industry, apply to it and put it in an application, because we actually really like technology that hasn't opened up into the real estate vertical. We're always looking for that kind of technology, and to think about, even if it's not this year or next year, to start, having a dialogue with us, putting in an application, putting in an application itself. Actually, we actually do follow-up calls. Even when you don't get through, if you're too early, you don't get through, we actually, I don't think many accelerators do this, but we actually offer a 15-minute, follow-up call to let you know, hey, have you thought of this? These are other resources. So we can set you up for next year. And we've actually done that last year for a company who are now in our shortlist for this year, a very strong shortlist, because they've ticked a couple of criteria that we needed. So really important to do that, making sure you understand that we're a sales and marketing program. And also, I think region specific, that's another criteria for us. How does your technology, how is it relevant to Asia Pacific? That you don't sort of come in and think, oh, we're going to test that market. Like, give me a little bit of more of an understanding of that. You have done a little bit of background research on the market and how it applies. You've spoken to a few people. I think that's really important because, when we got towards the end of the shortlist, the ones that really got through, the seed stage companies, for example, they had 10 years of experience in their sector. They didn't have the revenue, but they convinced us that they were the right team with the understanding of that region and that particular product and that customer, end of the day. And that's where I think that those criteria got ticked off. And, again, our application sort of opened on the 15th of October. So we're encouraging applications globally. But again, to finish off, again, being a former founder myself, I think it's really important that we make sure companies are growing with customers as opposed to venture funding. I've been quite a bit of a proponent of this myself because, firstly, there's always a lack of capital out in Asia Pacific. And right now during the pandemic, it's a bit of a hit and miss. Some VCs are still investing, some are not. And we're certainly actively investing. But, think about your customer first. If you can somehow change your model to serve, there's so many new problems now with the pandemic, and we've seen, we got really lucky. With our companies that they understood that and they sort of capitalized on these new problems. We've seen sales cycles just drop dramatically. And I'm quite an optimist. I think that there's a lot of opportunities out there for the companies who are going out there and listening to the market and actually, slightly adjusting what they're doing and serving the customer end of the day. Because even if you raise venture funding, you're still going to have to go back and get that customer. So if there's a way to shortcut that, it takes 6 months to get it. 6 months is very, very short amount of time you can raise a funding round. Can you spend that same 6 months getting more customers instead?
Well said. Yeah, I completely concur with that one. I mean, there is a lot more opportunities, new opportunities, and most people are telling me that, in the last 6 months, they've seen probably, and in their industry in particular, grow, but also fast forward 5 years because they have to keep up with what's going on. If they don't innovate, they die. And I think your other advice was to grow with your customer. Yeah, I think that's really good advice. So that's excellent. Thanks very much today, Shelley. It was a really great chat, and you're in a really unique position there in the Asia Pacific region.
Yes, I'm very excited to be back in this region, to be honest. Like, there's not many regions that literally are, like I said, putting 10 new cities into a country. Like, that blows my mind, And I was aware of that, but to actually speak to the developer doing it and then have the technology you've invested in actually go into those cities. For me, building more livable cities is really where I'm quite passionate about, like the workspaces make that our lives easier, where we're living, where we're working and where we're commuting. That's really what I'm passionate about, and with the amount of population growth we're expecting in the Asia Pacific region, I think that's a great opportunity for companies to come out to this region. So thank you, Matt. Had a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, thanks very much for your time today, Shelley, and we'll speak to you soon. Have a great afternoon.